the home of the common Joe and the common Sally in the know, even more so than all those media talking heads. Boom! Shakalaka, boom, goes college football. I haven't had a chance to get in here and do a podcast on the ever-changing landscape of college football, but college football expansion is going crazy. Even more so than last year with the Texas-Oklahoma thing, which to me was the start of all this. Now we got the Big Ten forging their way out west, becoming the, I guess you could call the first coast-to-coast conference. And now you got even Big Ten people and USC people in particular saying that maybe the Big Ten is cornering the SEC. Maybe the Big Ten is actually better than the SEC. But there's all these scenarios, many scenarios of all these teams in flux. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't even know if the Pac-12 is going to exist anymore. Let's talk about it. Woo! Man. Damn. This college football expansion thing is like a freight train out of control. Now we got the Big Ten, as I said, going out west and getting USC and UCLA. But the big thing in all this for me is I'm hearing these rumblings from particularly USC fans. You know, we've had a little tick for tack, me and the USC fans. I give them a little nickname. I call it the Skittle Shitters. I don't think they appreciate it too much, you know. But I was just trying to help them out, you know, give them a little something, a little flair maybe. But USC fans have actually been saying that the acquisition of USC and UCLA to the Big Ten is actually going to make the Big Ten better. Really. And they'll point out that USC and Stanford, for example, have more national championships overall than any other university in America. But nobody really cares about water polo and rowing and synchronized swimming. Nobody cares about that. Y'all know they don't. That's just something y'all straw grasping to because y'all been emasculated. Now, sure enough, USC's won national championships in football, but it's been a minute and ain't nowhere near as much as the SEC. The SEC has had 5 different national champions from this conference. So for them to say anything about us being top-heavy is ass backwards, and it's actually a reflection of them in the mirror because they're the ones that's top-heavy. USC's the only one that's won a national championship in the Pac-12. Ohio State is the only one that's won a national championship in the Big Ten this century. So who's top-heavy? Now, sure enough, the Big Ten could be cornering the SEC. They got USC and UCLA. Now they're trying to get Notre Dame. And Oregon and Washington on the wait list. But my question to Oregon and Washington is this. Why y'all putting yourself on the wait list? Why y'all letting the Big Ten dictate to y'all like that? For one team, for Notre Dame? How is it that one team gets to dictate what happens to 2 teams? That's my question. If I'm Oregon and Washington, I'm looking for another avenue. Maybe a greater avenue, one that nobody's thought of. A little out-of-the-box thinking. Sort of like my podcast partner Jonathan Lewis said. Why don't the SEC go after Oregon and Washington? Get that big market up there in the Pacific Northwest. Things that make you go, as Arsenio Hall said once upon a time. But this thing can also impact the Big 12. There's so many scenarios. The Big 12 is in talks with Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado. That is the rumor, and it's more than a rumor, I think. I think these 4 teams are about to become a part of the Big 12. If the Big 12 is smart, they'll go out there and grab those 4 teams. But if I was the Big 12, just like the SEC, I would at least talk to Oregon and Washington because that would be a huge get. Because at that point, the Big 12 could save itself, and the Big 12 could become a pretty big monster west of the Mississippi if they were to get Oregon and Washington. And then get those 4 teams to go with it. They would have 18 teams at that time. And you think they would probably go for a round number of 20. At that time, they could go a little bit outside the box thinking and maybe get some Southern California market and get San Diego State. Maybe even add Boise State to go with those Pac-12. This will be like a slight merger of the Pac-12 and the Big 12. And then given a Willy Wonka golden ticket to San Diego State and Boise State to move up from non-Power 5 to Power 5, like the Big 12 did for Cincinnati and BYU and Central Florida and Houston. It's just going to be a big old mess. And people say it's going to come down to 2 conferences eventually is what they think. They think it's going to be the Big Ten and the SEC, and you're going to have a college football version of the NFL's AFC and NFC. Now, back to the Big Ten. If the Big Ten, people think they're automatically going to go out there and add 2 more Western teams, to have a couple of dates, or at least maybe 2 or 3 dates for these 2 teams, USC and UCLA, to have out west, so there's not a logistics nightmare. If they have Oregon and Washington in the mix, well, then they can have a slight Western version and not have as much travel and what not to do. But they're still going to have to do some traveling because 4 teams ain't enough unless they go out there and add 6. But from what I'm hearing, the Big Ten may stay pat with USC and UCLA, try to get Notre Dame. If that don't work out, they've always had their eyes on getting down the southeastern part of the seaboard. Their name doesn't limit them. That's the good thing about the Big Ten as opposed to the SEC, is they're not bound by a geographical name. Now, I said in the past, the SEC just needs to change the wording of their acronym. They can keep the SEC and just become the Sports Entertainment Conference. Whew, a lot of stuff here. Now, the Big Ten, like I said, they've been long rumored to be interested in Virginia, North Carolina, Florida State maybe, Miami. Now, I'm not sure if Florida State's that AAU crap that they keep harping about, but I think they're going to have to just decide to let that shit go. They can still have high academic standards without having that crazy AAU crap tagged on each and every university that they try to add. Besides, Notre Dame's not AAU accredited, so it's bullshit. Now, Duke. The Duke-North Carolina rivalry in basketball would go away if that were the case. If North Carolina were to be added to the Big Ten, it would go away. But they could go after Duke too, and Kansas, to add to their basketball portfolio, because the Big Ten, they're a pretty good basketball conference for the most part. There's also rumors of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is one of the top-ranked academic institutions. Surprisingly, I didn't know this, but I think they're the top-ranked academic institution in the ACC, even ahead of Duke. Great research university. So Pittsburgh would definitely be a good candidate to add for the Big Ten. Probably should have been done a long time ago. Then you have other teams like West Virginia, Kansas State, Iowa State, Washington State, Oregon State. All these middle-of-the-road teams that don't look like they may not have a home. Now, the Oregon State and Washington State thing, I can tell you right now what's going to happen with that, in my opinion. They're going to be put in the Mountain West. If San Diego State and Boise State were to get an offer to move up, Oregon State and Washington State would move down. And like I said before in one of my other podcasts, what you're going to end up having is a second tier. A version of Division I AA that we had back in the day is going to come back, in my opinion. And you're going to have some of these teams fall down to that. West Virginia, for me, is a tough one because West Virginia is ranked number 15 in all-time wins. There's teams below West Virginia in all-time wins that have won national championships, but West Virginia is the highest win-totaled university in football without a national championship, and they have a really passionate fan base. So I would like to see West Virginia get picked up by either the Big Ten or the SEC in all this. Or if the Big 12 does, so people hadn't thought about this caveat, if the Big 12 does go out there and steal Oregon and Washington away from the Big Ten, who's dragging their feet, and Oregon and Washington be like, hey, look, we got Nike money at Oregon. Washington's long been a pretty decent program. We don't have to kowtow to the Big Ten. We'll just join the Big 12, and then we'll have a Big 3, because I think that the Big Ten is going to concentrate its efforts on going to war with the SEC over the ACC teams. There'll be some teams left out. Wake Forest, Syracuse, Boston College, Rutgers. Well, Rutgers is already in the Big Ten, excuse me. Syracuse, Boston College. They'll all be left out, in my opinion. These teams may stay in the ACC, and what you're going to have really is these teams like teams in the Mountain West and AAC and Conference USA and Sun Belt. They'll all move up into these conferences like the Pac-12 or the ACC, and they'll still be that conference by name, but it'll have like an entirely new look and like 7 or 8 new faces, and it really won't be the ACC and the Big 12 that it once was. And that's what'll happen. West Virginia people long been wanting to go to the ACC, but if you join the ACC after it's been raided by the Big Ten and the SEC, what are you really getting? You're getting a shell of a conference that you once wanted to be a part of, that's not the conference that you wanted to be a part of. So many scenarios here. I mean, this stuff has got my head spinning, got me confused. You guys and gals tell me what you think's going to happen. I think what we're going to end up having here, like I said, is an AFC, NFC version of college football. The Big Ten's going to go out. And let me go one thing before I get into that. A lot of people keep saying, oh, if you keep inviting teams at smaller pieces of the pie, you can't keep doing that. Well, why not? They just keep doing it. They went from 10 to 12 to 14 to 16. You think they're not going to go to 20, 24, and maybe even 32? 32 apiece? Bigger versions of the AFC and the NFC. It's crazy. But to say that there's going to be smaller pieces of pie is just not true. If you get bigger names and more money because of the bigger names, well, wouldn't you make more money? It wouldn't be a smaller piece of the pie. If you got all these big name schools in 2 different conferences or even 3 different conferences, the TV rights are going to be through the roof, man. They're going to have so many media markets to placate to. They could probably make billion-dollar deals out of this. Now, I know the Big Ten is set to make almost $1 billion in their new deal, but we could be talking upwards into the billions, like maybe $5 or $6 billion per conference or per league. And that's what I think is going to happen. I think we're going to have either 2 super leagues or maybe even 3. If the Big 12 takes the bull by the horns and they go out there and get Oregon and Washington, they could be a major player again. And they could say, well, check this out, Oklahoma and Texas. We're doing just fine without you. They could actually say that and people not snicker at them if they were to go out there and be ultra aggressive with Oregon and Washington and sell to them the fact that they could own most of the western part of the United States, and that Oregon and Washington shouldn't have to kowtow and beg the Big Ten and hope and pray that they get invited to the party. So that's what I think is going to happen. I think we're going to have 2 to 3 super leagues, and then we're going to have some kind of major playoff system. Now that these conferences, the so-called alliance, has turned on each other, now we probably won't have to worry about the negotiations for the playoffs. They are going to probably have to work a way out to cut Fox in. because Fox is going to put up a huge fight with ESPN over this. And ESPN owns most rights to college football, so we're going to have to find a way to work Fox into all this. But this stuff it's just got my head spinning. So 3 major conferences and maybe 2 major networks giving billions of dollars to all these universities. And I know a lot of people don't like the way college football is going, but with 3 mega conferences like this, the Big 12, the Big Ten, and the SEC, and I guarantee you that somebody's going to end up having to change the name between the Big Ten and the Big 12 because they sound too much alike. And the SEC is going to have to either reword their acronym or make up an entirely different acronym. And they're going to end up negotiating this playoff a lot easier. Probably have it in place, like I said in one of my past podcasts, will probably have a playoff scenario in place by the summer of 2023. And my opinion is, now that you're going to have all these major names and maybe just 2 or 3 conferences, it'll probably go from 12, and I didn't really want this, it'll probably go from 12 to 16. It'll be either a 12-team playoff like the NFL, or it may even go to 16 because of all the teams in the 3 super leagues. You guys and gals, tell me what you got to say about all this. What do you guys and gals think? Who do you think is going to go where? Who do you think is going to be? Who's going to survive? Who's going to be left in this college football holocaust? And with that, I'm going to get off of here. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to this channel, The Big Four. And as always, KMCA to all the other teams. Class is now dismissed.